Hello, everybody. Ron Wildman in for former Macon Mayor Jack Ellis with the Middle Georgia Spotlight. Our guest today, a legendary figure in Georgia politics, former House Democratic leader.
House Democratic Majority Leader.
That's
yes.
right, Larry Walker. And we'll be talking to him on our Middle Georgia Spotlight today. And it's a good time to be talking to you about that. Just recently, the Georgia National Fair ended. And the idea of this fair began inside those two ears right there at the Georgia State Fair down at Central City Park one time.
Yes, sir, that's right. We, with my children and my wife, we were there for a hog show in that what could be a beautiful round building. I don't know the name of it, but
Round building.
The round building, and frankly, they had about 100 young people there with their hogs, and the place was dirty, and they had 2 faucets to wash 100 hogs and in the mud. And they had a judge from Oklahoma, and all of that made an impression on me. And I went back to Atlanta and talked to Henry Reeves, who was chairman of the Ag Committee, and told him that it just was embarrassing, really. And he said, we're going to do something about it. We formed an ad hoc committee. I ended up having a big role in getting the money, which was important, the initial money being $15 million. And we were on our way. Incidentally, that $15 million, most of it went in the ground. It was infrastructure under the ground. We spent a lot of money and you couldn't see anything, but fortunately we were able to get some more money, and it's an outstanding facility today.
Well, your first thought, I understood at the time covering that, was to improve the state fair in Macon. And
That's
then it
right.
turned into something else.
At least that was in my mind.
Yes.
To improve the facility in Macon, and it evolved from that until we needed to be more bold, I guess, in our thinking and what we could do. And it was called by one of my good friends now with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution a boondoggle, and I tease him about it a lot. And I said, oh, no, it's going to work, but I was like the little boy whistling in the cemetery. I didn't really know whether it was going to work or not, but it's turned out, it exceeded all my expectations, really.
Being located in Perry was not just happenstance, because there were several locations suggested. I mean, they really tried to find the right location.
That's true, and the committee voted 7-2 to put it in Perry. Truth of the matter is we could have had another vote. We could have had an 8-1 vote, but it was 7-2, and it was a great place right there on the interstate, flat land, not a lot of cost to cure in putting it there, 600 acres. After we got to 600, a few years later, I got money put in the budget to acquire 600 more acres. So across Elko Road, the Ag Center Authority owns 600 more acres. It's never been used, but one day will probably be used for something.
Well, along the interstate like that, easy access really meant a lot to this.
That's exactly right, and a lot of exposure, people riding by there and seeing it and saying, you know, I'd like to go to that sometime. I'd like to see what that is and what it's all about. So you can't overestimate the value of the publicity that you get from just riding down the interstate and seeing it, especially at night when the fair's going on. It's quite a sight.
Well, the Midwest has the reputation of having these giant state fairs every year. You've been to these other fairs. This one is brand new, 30 years ago, which is nothing in the age of infrastructure and everything. How does this rate visual-wise and utility-wise with these other fairs?
Well, it's wonderful. I don't know how it rates, but the carnival part of it is separated from what I would call the traditional fair part. You can go to the traditional fair part with exhibits, animals, art made by people, or you can go to the circus part of it, the carnival part of it. And the carnival part is all on asphalt or paving, and you're not in the mud, you're not in the dust, and it's just a real clean, nice facility. The right hopper people have been putting on the carnival ever since the fair opened. 30 years they've come there with a carnival. They actually have 2 carnivals. They leapfrog each other. One is setting up, the other one's operating. Then that one is setting up, and this one's operating. So they leapfrog each other. They start up north, and they head south, and they end up in Florida where they live. Fine people, good people.
Now, your hometown is in Perry. Of course, you have a law practice down there, as you've had for several years. What has it done for that part of Houston County and Perry and all of Middle Georgia?
Well, Perry is booming, I'll tell you that. It's a hot little town. It's not so little anymore. The newly elected mayor, Randall Walker, told me within the last week there were 19,000 people in Perry. When I started practicing law in Perry by myself in 1965, there were probably 5,000 or 6,000 people in Perry. Now there are 19,000 people, and it's growing every day. Perry High School is growing as fast as any high school in Houston County. That says a lot, and we're real proud of what's going on in Perry. We've got the interstate, we've got the Ag Center, we've got, of course, Robins Air Force Base. A lot of good stuff happening in Houston County, and a lot of good stuff happening in Perry.
Getting back to the fair for a minute, the agriculture part is really what it's all about in the minds of the legislature. Exactly.
That's right, and it's for young people. It's for FFA boys and girls and 4-H boys and girls, and I've been to banquets where there'll be 1,000 of them in the room, and probably out of the 1,000, there's not a one of them that's fooling with drugs. And the reason is their parents are engaged with them. They're working with them and the animals, and they're there at the banquet with them, and it just says a lot, I think, for the FFA and 4-H, and it says a lot for being involved with your children.
Of course, our governors have supported the fair, but this governor in particular, Governor Kemp, has spent hours and hours over the years because of his children at that fairground.
Well, that's right, and Governor Deal was a former FFA member. I think he was a national president. I believe that's right. He had a big role in the nation. Sonny Perdue, of course, was an ag man. Now we've got Kemp. So we've been really fortunate, but people that weren't ag people out, you know, like Roy Barnes, for example. His daddy was in the feed and seed business, and they had cows, and he knew about that kind of stuff. So we've been real fortunate that our governors were very interested in what was going on down there and very supportive. Joe Frank Harris, my friend. I supported Joe Frank when he ran for governor and was a good friend of his, and then I got to be majority leader and was real close to Tom Murphy. So I had a friend in the governor's office and a friend in the speaker's office, and also friends in the Senate, and we were able to get a lot of money for the Ag Center, which is, I think, paid off for the people of Georgia.
You speak of Speaker Murphy, larger-than-life figure. Came down here several times for breakfast with you, as I covered a couple of those over the years, and he was very instrumental in the location, wasn't he?
Absolutely, 100% for it. And I was in a meeting one night, and I had heard some talk, and there'd never been a request of me, but I'd heard some talk about a conference center or an exhibit hall. And we were working on the budget one night, and we're about through with the budget, and Mr. Murphy said, "Is anything else?" And it was hard for me to do this, but I said, "Yes, sir, we need a conference center at the Ag Center in Perry." And he dropped his head when I said that, and it seemed like to me he kept it down 5 minutes. It was probably 30 seconds. He raised it back up and said, "How much is it going to cost?" And I said, "About $10 million, Mr. Speaker." He dropped his head down again, raised it back up. He said, "Put it in the budget." And it was put in the budget, and that's the Miller Murphy Howard building. I really envisioned more of a conference center. The director down there at that time wanted an exhibit hall. We kind of got a hybrid, and it's a fine building. The Miller Murphy Howard building. Zell Miller, Tom Murphy, Pierre Howard, the Miller Murphy Howard building. I suggested the name. The Ag Center Board went along with that.
Before we move on, tell me more about Speaker Murphy.
Complex man, but a good man with a good heart. He would tell you he was a conservative. In a lot of areas, he was a conservative, but he was also a populist. He was for the underdog. On many occasions, we'd be getting ready to put the budget to bed, thinking we had everything, getting ready to print the budget so it could be presented to the House. And he would come in and say, "We got to put more money in the Blind Academy. We got to do more for the school bus drivers. Got to do more for the nursing homes." He was always, there was some group like that The school bus drivers being a really good example. I mean, nobody else particularly were interested in the school bus drivers but Tom Murphy, and he got them on the state insurance and got them a little retirement program. That was a huge thing for the school bus drivers, as you can imagine. And people that haul your children to school every day, they deserve some of those considerations.
And looking back, the legislator was considered rural, but he never threw Atlanta under the bus, did he?
No, he was anything that was good for Georgia, he was for it. Now, he didn't believe in throwing money away, but if it was good for Georgia and he thought it was going to help Georgia, he would support it. And Murphy was for a lot of things that the World Congress Center. If Murphy had put thumbs down on it, there would have been no World Congress Center. He didn't do that. He did the progressive thing, and the thing that's made millions and millions and millions of dollars for the people in Georgia and tax income for the state of Georgia, because Tom Murphy said, yes, we need to do this.
In your years up there, how did the Atlanta airport rate?
Well, the Atlanta airport is the busiest airport in the world. What can you say? A lot of good decisions have been made. I guess with anything that big and that much money involved and that many people moving through it, it's going to be controversial at times. And you and I know that at times the Atlanta airport has been controversial. But having said that, I go back to what I said initially. It certainly meant a lot to the state of Georgia. I went up with my aunt when I was a little boy. I don't know whether I was 8 or 10 or 12 years old, but I'd go visit my aunt in Atlanta, and she would take us out to the airport to watch the planes landing and taking off. And I remember I thought that was a big deal at that time, but in thinking back on it, that was a small thing, really. And now look what's out there now, the busiest airport in the world. So again, I would say a lot of good decisions have been made, some that weren't so good.
And it made the state what it is.
Absolutely.
I first really thought of Atlanta back when I was watching a movie in the 60s, not knowing what the South was like, and finding out that it was the world headquarters for Coca-Cola.
Yes, sir.
And I said, well, that must be something going on down there.
Yes, sir. And Georgia has, when I was in the 8th grade at Perry Junior High School, I made the graduation speech. My teachers helped me write the little speech that I made. And I can remember a lot of it. And I said, Georgia's a great state and its people are great people. And in that year, which I guess was in about 1950, 51, Georgia was not one of the great states in this country. It really just was not.
No, it wasn't
but today I could make that same speech and I'd be telling the absolute truth.
That was in what grade?
Well, it was in the 8th grade, so that had been 14 years. It would have been later than that, probably in 1955, 54, somewhere along.
Were you mapping out your future at that time? Did you know you wanted to be what you are today?
Well, my granddaddy Gray, who I almost idolized and loved, I loved all my grandparents very much. But he told me one time, I think I was in about the 8th grade, he said, the way you like to talk, you'd make a good lawyer. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. And I always said I wanted to be a lawyer. And I went to the University of Georgia. By going in the summers, I got an extra year. So 2 years out of high school, I was in law school at the University of Georgia. A lot of it had simply to do with my granddaddy saying, you'd make a good lawyer, you ought to be a lawyer, or something about a lawyer. And I've been practicing law in Period now for almost 55 years. Next June will be 55 years.
So in the 60s, you hung your shingle up.
I hung my shingle up.
And then what happened?
Well, I had a completely different kind of a law practice than I have today. I did anything I could do legitimately to make money. I collected debts, I did divorces, I've tried murder cases, I did wills for people. My practice today is entirely different. I don't do any criminal, I don't do any divorce. I don't advertise. We don't advertise. I say it's a group of really fine, outstanding people that I'm associated with. But we have a tremendous real estate practice. We do all kind of civil stuff. We form corporations, we form LLCs, we do civil litigation. We do road wreck cases, but we don't advertise. We don't get on TV and advertise, but we do handle those. We've got some really big, sophisticated litigation we're involved in today. I hope it turns out as good as we think it may turn out.
When you say we, who's in there with you?
Well, I've got Skeet Hubbart's there every day. He's actually retired, and my brother David, who has had leukemia, but is doing better. He's not active in the practice. He's there. We've got Mike Gray, hospital lawyer for about 30 years, a Houston hospital lawyer. We've got Kelly Moore, who is very active in the American Bar Association, been honored by the American Bar Association. She's the one that's got a very complicated, sophisticated case right now involving one of the manufacturers of automobiles. We've got Brooke Newby, another female great lawyer. John Hubbard knows as much about real estate, I think, as anybody in Middle Georgia. I hope I haven't left anybody out. I'll be in trouble if I have, but it's a mighty good group of people.
Well, after you were in Perry doing law for a while, you decided to get into politics, the legislature, or were you in it earlier than that with another?
No, I never really thought about getting into politics. Sam Nunn was a young state legislator from Perry, and a friend of mine. We've been friends a long time, back to law practice days, and he came to me and told me that he was going to run for the United States Senate. He said, I'm going to run for the Senate. And I said, what you want to run for the Senate for? You're already in the House. I thought he meant the Georgia Senate. And he told me, and I thought he'd lost his mind. I was going to help him, but I didn't see any way he could win. And he asked me to come in his law firm, and I thought, if you run for the United States Senate, I might run for your seat. And it wouldn't do to have two in one law firm running. So I told him I thought I'd stay where I was. He ran for the United States Senate. I ran for the state house. Cullen Talton ran for sheriff, and we all three got elected on the same day.
Remember that period of time. So when you got up here at the House, you were a freshman. What happened then?
Well, I was, luck and fate is a good thing if it's in your favor. And they seated me in Sam Nunn's chair. I took his seat as far as his district, and I also took his chair. And seated to my left was a tall, dark-haired, kind of a introvert, a shy kind of a fellow in a lot of ways, but had a lot of wit, really, and his name was Joe Frank Harris. So I was seated by Joe Frank Harris. And I liked him very much, and we liked his wife, and Janice and I, and Joe Frank and Elizabeth got to be friends. And I'd been up there a year, and the Speaker of the House, George Smith from Swainsboro, died. And Joe Frank told me, I'll never forget it. He said, "Larry, we're going to support Mr. Murphy for Speaker, Tom Murphy." And you know what I said? I said, "Okay." So I supported Tom Murphy, and Tom Murphy got elected. And I was kind of, in my second or third year, I was kind of in the inner circle. I was in what I call it the outer inner circle. I wasn't in the 4 or 5 that are right there in the middle, but I was in that next group of about 10 people, and I was just lucky that I was seated by Joe Frank Harris. I think that gave me a good start on being effective and active in the legislature.
How soon after that did Joe Frank run for governor?
Beg your pardon?
How soon after Speaker Murphy getting in there did Joe Frank run for governor?
Well, I think that it must have been 2 more years that we elected a new governor, and he told me he's going to run, and much like Sam Nunn for the United States Senate, I said, I'm going to work for Joe Frank, but I don't believe Joe Frank can get elected governor. But I did work for him. I worked harder for Joe Frank probably than I ever worked for myself.
One of my memories, which I probably shouldn't have to remember this, was covering you and Joe Frank coming down the Macon right after the inauguration. Who was before Joe Frank? Busby?
George Busby.
Well, anyway, it must have been the week after the inauguration of that governor. You guys were on the campaign trail already.
Yes.
I've never forgotten that.
Well, that's the way we were, and we were very good friends. And when he got elected governor, he asked me to be his floor leader. That was the person in the House that handled all the governor's business and was kind of the governor's eyes and ears in the House. And of course, I was flattered by it, and I told him, yes, I would like to be his floor leader. I did that for 4 years. The majority leader, Al Burris, died, and I ran for majority leader and got elected majority leader, and then I got to be very close to Tom Murphy. So I was close to Joe Frank, I was close to Tom Murphy, and I was in a good position to help the people in my area, and I hope that I, along with Sonny Watson, who was great, Sonny Perdue came, I think did a lot for Middle Georgia.
Well, I was over at Channel 24 at the time. I was at Channel 13, and we covered extensively up there then. And when I moved to 24, we came up every day during that legislature.
I remember.
And your delegation, that Houston delegation and the Houston Bib, basically, that as a conglomerate became the top delegation in the state during that period of time.
You know why? We cooperated with each other. We supported each other. As you know, Ron, there are a lot of delegations up there that the members, multi-member delegations, they don't even speak to each other. They're at each other's throats. And I have talked to my son, Larry Walker III, the state senator, and I'm proud to say that he and Shaw Blackman and the other legislators from this area are the same way. They work with each other. They support each other. When you do that, it'll pay off for the district you represent.
Well,
Keith Clark.
At the time when you all were up there with that delegation, we had a U.S. senator and a U.S. congressman from Perry,
Right.
Richard Ray, and
Right.
Sam Nunn as the senator, and it
Right.
just seemed like everything was just booming down there in Houston.
Well, it helps. I mean, you're in a position that you can help your people if you know how to operate.
So Robbins Air Force Base has been important. How were you able to help Robbins over the years?
Well, of course, as you know, that's more of a federal thing than it is a state thing, but we've done everything. Janice and I have had all the generals and as many as 100, 150 people out to the house, to our home, and we've taken them fishing. We had some of these generals that had never hardly fished before came to our place and fished and thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, anything they asked me to do and ask any of our delegation really to do, we tried to do it. The Veterans Center in Houston County, that's the kind of thing that was done. We were able to get a lot of money for the Air Force Museum. I've got 3 model airplanes on my table in my office, and people come in and comment on them, and I said, hey, you know, they're really nice. They didn't cost the taxpayers about $400,000 or $500,000 for me to have those, which some of them don't think that's too funny of a joke, but we did help the Air Force Museum, which has been a big thing for Houston County. A lot of people come there. It advertises the U.S. Air Force, and I think it's a good thing, proud that we were able to support it.
Well, that's the face of Robbins these days, because you can't get through those gates unless you're there on business, but that museum is open to the public every day.
Right. Wonderful museum.
You're talking about the folks at the Air Force Base and others in politics. Personal relationships mean so much in that business, doesn't it?
Yeah, just like all of life, really,
Yeah.
Ron. I mean, that's is personal relationships will help you in all aspects of life, but especially, I think, in politics. It's people that respect you and like you, and it's just what we do. If people help you, you try to help them, and some people think that's wrong, but I don't think it's wrong. I think that's the way life is. I think that's the way schools work. That's the way communities work. That's the way families work. That's the way churches work. It's not a lot different from politics when you get right down to it.
Among the other accomplishments in Perry these days, a lot of people go to work at Frito-Lay. There's a story behind that too, how it got there.
Well, you embarrassed me by asking me, but you've asked me, and I'm going to tell you, because I supported Joe Frank Harris and was his friend. When he got elected governor, he told the head of the Department of Industry, Trade, and Tourism, is what it was called then. I think it's called the Department of Economic Development now. But he told him, he said, I want you to put something in Perry for Larry.
Just like that.
Just like that. And as a result of that, Frito-Lay was put in Perry.
They were coming to Georgia anyway.
They were coming to Georgia, but they were put in Perry, and they employ 1,400 people now. And I've had a close relationship with the Frito-Lay people ever since they came there. They are fine people. They employ 1,400 people. They pay good wages. Now, they expect them to work. They work hard, the people that work at Frito-Lay. And, of course, they've got the pick of the crop, too, of people that are looking for a job. They get the best people, but they pay real good. Been a tremendous citizen, and no telling how much the economic benefit of Frito-Lay being in Houston County has been. It's an enormous figure, I'm sure.
When we get companies like that coming in here, local communities and local politicians have an obligation to kind of stay in touch with these people, make sure they're getting what they need to operate.
Right, that's exactly right. And they call on you too, and they've called on me. And the things we've done has been helpful to them. The Frito-Lay plants compete with each other. They compete with each other, and the one that's doing the best job are the ones that get the work to do. And the one in Perry is constantly right at the top as far as the production and how the workforce operates and performs. So they constantly increasing the size of it because of the workload.
Now, your legislative district encompassed what area?
Well, I've had reapportionment. It changed, you know. It's not always the same, but I've always had Perry. I've had parts of Warner Robins. I've not had parts of Warner Robins. I've had Macon County. I've had Sly County. My first 10 or 12 years, I had those counties. And I even had part of Cordell at one time. So they changed through the years, but my base has always been South Houston County and Perry. That's where a large percentage of my people live there, and I like that because that's where I'm from. And my daddy was in business there, in the farm equipment business. My grandfather was in the Chevrolet dealership business in Perry, and I think both of them were fine people and good family name. And so that was a big plus for me, was being there and representing the people that knew not necessarily me or not only me, but they knew my family. I've had a lot of family there. My great-grandparents came to Perry in the early 1900s. They had 4 children. They all stayed in Perry, lived in Perry, had families in Perry. My mother and daddy had 4 children, and they all stayed in Perry and lived in Perry. Janice and I had 4 children, and they all stayed in Perry and lived in Perry. Now, you tell me if that's not unusual this day and time, that all 4 of our children live in Perry. Larry is an insurance agent. Wendy is in the real estate business, married to Bob Way from Hawkinsville. Russell and John Gray practice law in Perry. So they all right there in Perry, and that's real comforting to you, especially when you're in politics.
Let's stick to the political Walker, the senator. Tell me about him.
Smart, hard worker, decent. When he went to Atlanta, I told him, I said, Larry, I don't have but one piece of advice to give you. And the advice is this: be nice to everybody. Be nice to the doorkeepers. Be nice to the shoeshine man. Be nice to the secretaries. I said, you can be nice to the Republicans. Just because you don't vote with them doesn't mean you can't be decent and nice to them. And I think he tries to do that. And I think that's the way politics should work. I think we've lost our way in the partisan politics and having where if they see a Democrat speaking to a Republican, he's on the black list or the bad list, whatever you want to call it, and vice versa. And I think it's out of hand. I think you ought to listen to the other side to see what their views are. It might change your views.
Larry, we're running out of time. We didn't even mention your books, and I know when you go on Fox, at least they mention your books. Could I get you to come back and do another program with us, and we'll do it and mention your books and your newspaper and some of the other things you've been doing over the years, and some more of the people, you know.
I'd be honored to. You and I have been friends for almost 50 years, if you get thinking about it.
That long?
Yes, and about anything you ask me to do, it's decent, I'd do it.
Well, let's do another one, okay?
That'd be good.
I want to thank you for being with us today. We'll come back next week with Larry Walker one more time. For Jack Ellis, I'm Ron Wildman here at WMUV TV.